In today's video, we are going to be discussing the anatomical position, terms, and planes. And here we have the outline of what we'll be discussing. So first on our list is the anatomical position. Now, the anatomical position is the body in an upright position with the head facing forward and the eyes looking straight ahead. The arms down to the side of the body with the palms facing forward and the thumb and fingers straight. In other words, you're not making a fist. And then the legs straight and close together and the feet flat to the ground and parallel to each other. Okay, and then the toes facing forward as well. So this diagram is a good illustration of the anatomical position. So we can see here that the head is upright. Okay, the head is upright, and then we have the palms facing forward, the arm to the side of the body, the legs close together, and the feet parallel to each other and facing forward. This is how the anatomical position looks anteriorly, and this is how it looks posteriorly. Okay, now the anatomical position can also be maintained when lying down. So lying down or lying on the back is supine. Okay, so when you lie on your back, that is a supine position, and then when you lie face down, that is prone. Okay, so this is the anatomical position, and this is a good representation of how the anatomical position looks like. Now let's take a look at some terms in anatomy. For this video, the anatomical terms we'd be considering are terms that describe position and location in the body. Okay, so now in anatomy, in order to prevent ambiguity, certain terms are used to describe the position of structures of the body. Okay, now the first anatomical term that we'll be considering is superior. Okay, superior. Now it's important for us to take note of the fact that anatomical terms are relative. For example, the lungs is superior to the stomach, or rather the lungs are superior to the stomach, but this is a relative position. The lungs are not absolutely superior. Okay, there might be other structures superior to the lungs, but relative to the stomach, the lungs are superior. Okay, so superior means closer to the top. Okay, closer to the head region. And in this picture that we have here, this is labeled as superior, so closer to the head region. And with the example, the lungs are superior to the stomach. Okay, so the lungs are closer to the head region as compared to the stomach. The next term we'd be looking at is inferior. But before we consider the term inferior, in an embryo or in embryology, the term superior is referred to as cranial. And this is because unlike a developed human standing in an anatomical position, the embryo is not necessarily standing or positioned anatomically. So we use the term cranial to refer to structures that are closer to the head region or closer to the top of the body. Now, inferior means closer to the feet. Okay, so the stomach is inferior to the lungs. The stomach is closer to the feet as compared to the lungs. And here we have this representing the inferior region of the body. And in an embryo, inferior is referred to as caudal, that is towards the tail. The next term we'd be considering is anterior. Now, anterior means closer to the front of the body. Okay, closer to the front of the body. So this is an anterior view, and this is closer to the front of the body. So structures that are closer to the front of the body are referred to as anterior view, and are referred to as anterior. Okay, and in an embryo, anterior, the word for anterior is ventral, and ventral means towards the abdomen. Okay, the next term would be considering is posterior. Now, posterior means towards the rear, and the word for posterior when referring to an embryo is dorsal. Okay, dorsal means towards the back, so this is the posterior view, towards the back, towards the rear, and this is closer to the front. The next term would be considering is median. Now, median, unlike all the other terms that we have been considering, is an absolute term. The term median means at the middle, okay, at the midline. Now, it's not a relative term, it's an absolute term, and it's at the midline. Okay, so we can say, for example, that the nose is a median structure. Okay, now a relative term for median would be medial with an L. Now, medial means closer to the midline. Well, median with an N means at the midline. Okay. Another anatomical term is lateral. Okay, lateral means further away from the midline or closer to the side of the body. Okay, so further away from the middle. Okay, so for this particular picture, this is a lateral view. It's the side view. Lateral is a fancy word for side, but in anatomy we don't make use of side, we say lateral. So this is the lateral view of the human body, meaning further away from the middle. Now, another anatomical term is proximal. Okay, proximal means closer to the trunk, or when referring to a muscle or a bone, it could mean closer to the point of origin. Okay, so proximal. And the next term we'll be considering is distal. Distal means further away from the trunk, or when referring to a bone or a muscle, it means further away from the point of origin. Okay, now we have another set of terms that refer to mainly internal structures of the body. So the terms we've been considering so far are used for mainly external structures. However, terms such as superficial, deep, and intermediate are mainly used in describing internal structures. So a structure is said to be superficial when it's closer to the surface of the body. Okay, when it's closer to the surface of the body. Deep is used for structures that are further away from the surface, and intermediate is used for structures that are in between. Okay, now another set of anatomical terms are used in describing the side. Okay, they are used in describing structures that are located laterally. The first term would be considering for this is unilateral. A structure is said to be unilateral when it's located on only one side of the body. Okay, now for example, the stomach is a unilateral structure and it's located on the left hand side of the body. And the liver is another example of a unilateral structure and it's located on the right side of the body. Okay, now we have bilateral. Okay, bilateral means that it's located on both the left and the right side of the body. For example, the kidney is a bilateral structure. We have one kidney to the right and another kidney to the left. Our arms and legs are bilateral structures because we have a right hand and we have a left hand, right leg and left leg. okay, and these structures are located on both sides of the body. Another term is ipsilateral. It's used in describing structures that are located on the same side of the body. Okay, for example, the right eye and the right ear are both located on the right side of the body, and so they can be said to be ipsilateral. The right hand and the right leg are located both on the right side of the body, and they can be said to be ipsilateral. So the next term we'd be considering is contralateral. Now, contralateral means located on opposite sides of the body. Okay, so for example, the right arm and the left leg are contralateral because we have the right arm on the right side of the body and the left leg on the left side of the body. So these are the anatomical terms that we'll be considering for this video. So let's take a look at anatomical planes. First anatomical plane we'll be considering is the sagittal plane. Now, the sagittal plane divides the body into left and right. Okay, now there are two types of sagittal plane. We have the parasagittal plane and the mid-sagittal plane. Mid-sagittal. The mid-sagittal plane is also known as the median plane. Okay, and of course, the sagittal plane is a vertical plane. Okay, so it divides the body into left and right. Now, the parasagittal plane divides the body into unequal left and right side, while the mid-sagittal plane divides the body into equal left and right side. So, taking a look at this diagram or this picture that we have here, the mid-sagittal plane looks something like this. Okay, so the mid-sagittal plane is this, dividing the body into equal left and right. Okay, this is the mid-sagittal plane and how it divides the body. Now, the parasagittal plane could be around here, dividing the body into unequal left and right half. Now, because the parasagittal plane could be at any position, it's always important to state exactly what parasagittal plane is being referred to. So for example, we could have a parasagittal plane that cuts through the middle of the clavicle. Okay, so take for example, it cuts through the middle of the right clavicle. Okay, now such a plane would be referred to as a midclavicular plane. Okay, midclavicular parasagittal plane. Now, this parasagittal plane is going to divide the body into a left side, into a larger left side as compared to the right side. The midclavicular plane on the right clavicle of the body. Okay, the next plane we'd be considering is the frontal coronal plane. Now, the frontal coronal plane divides the body into front and back portion. Okay, and of course, it's a vertical plane. So, taking a look at this diagram, the frontal coronal plane is this. Okay. The frontal coronal plane is this, dividing the body into front and back portions. Okay, now just like the parasagittal plane, the frontal and coronal plane can also run through any part of the body. So we could have a frontal coronal plane running through the ears or running through the back of the ears or the front of the ears. So it's important for us to always specify exactly what frontal or coronal plane we're referring to. Now the next plane of the body we'd be considering is the transverse plane. Okay, so we have the transverse plane. Now the transverse plane divides the body into top and bottom portions. Okay, so it divides the body into an upper portion and a lower portion. Okay, and just like parasagittal and frontal coronal, it's also important to state exactly what transverse plane is being referred to. So we can have a transverse plane that runs just below the thorax and dividing the body into the upper and the lower part, and we can have another transverse plane that runs through the belly button. Okay, so these two transverse plane, although they both divide the body into upper and lower portions, they are actually different. Okay, so taking a look at this diagram, the transverse plane is the plane labeled as 1. So this is the transverse plane. Okay, the plane labeled as 2. Okay, so this plane labeled as 2 is a mid-sagittal plane, also known as the median plane, and the plane labeled as 3, that is this plane, okay, is frontal coronal plane. So the frontal coronal plane is the plane labeled as 3. So we have come to the end of this video. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you for watching till the end.